Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. Well done, because I know it's quite tough getting up in the morning, particularly on a Friday at the moment. It's cold, it's dark, you've had to come all the way over to East London, but thank you so much for being here. I promise you it is going to be well worth it, because we have an absolutely cracking day ahead. I should probably just mention anyone who is expecting to learn about new recipes of how to create drinks with pieces of fruit from the fridge, you're in the wrong room. But we will be serving a few drinks during the refreshment break later anyway. Welcome everyone to JUICE, the Joined Up Infrastructure Conference and Exhibition. My name is Nicki and I'm going to be your host for today. If any of you do watch the Electric Racing Championship, Formula E, you might recognise me from that one. Usually sort of running up and down the pit lane in a desperate sort of crusade to try and hunt down a driver who's probably just binned it in the wall and doesn't want to speak to me. That's what my day normally consists of. But today is all about learning about the infrastructure around the electric vehicle market. Now, obviously I'm coming from the world of motorsport, and it's amazing at the moment how many car manufacturers are embracing electrification. They're embracing the new world. We're seeing, obviously, more new electric vehicles coming onto our roads, which is fantastic. This new world is fully being embraced at the moment. However, what might let it down is, of course, the infrastructure, and that's what we are here to talk about. Apparently, the EV sector needs a six-fold increase in the number of electric vehicle charging points by 2020 if we're going to provide adequate infrastructure to keep up with the numbers. And as things stand, you know, it's going to be very hard to actually make that happen. But hopefully, with all of you guys here in the room today, we will make it possible. And actually do make the most of it, connecting with each other, because you guys are the trailblazers when it comes to this. You are, you know, you're going to be really sort of carving out the new future in the way the electric vehicle industry looks. We've also got to thank today's sponsors, the Algorithm people. They are lending their support and expertise. And actually, we will be listening after our international keynote speaker, but we will be hearing from the Algorithm People ambassador, who is a TV presenter in the house down here at the front. Give him a round of applause, Mr. Quentin Wilson. He'll be telling us what he's been up to and also a little bit about where he sees the vision and the direction that the EV infrastructure is heading. Now, we have a number of incredible speakers who are going to be here today, so hopefully you can gain insight and expertise from that. Just so you are aware, we are going to be doing it, the sort of the format of the day is that the speaker will come up and talk first, and then we'll be doing 2 Q&A sessions. So if you do have any questions, save those questions for the Q&A. Hopefully we'll get into a good discussion and a bit of a debate. They'll be taking place, the first one at 11:20 and then the second one at 1 o'clock. So do make sure you have time. But of course our speakers will be around for the day. So during the breaks, you know, if you want to have a chat with them, they would love to hear from you. There will be a couple of refreshment breaks as well, so don't worry, we won't let you starve to death. So that is probably all from me for now. So let's kick off today's JUICE with our keynote speaker who's travelled quite some distance to be here today to tell us about her first-hand experience of how mainstream EV transport can become if you have the right infrastructure solution in the right places. And I think you probably all agree with me that the poster child when it comes to electric vehicle ownership is, of course, Norway. Their country has the world's biggest per capita market for electric vehicles. So without further ado, please welcome the Secretary General of Norwegian Electric Vehicle Association, Christina Boo.
Hello everyone, great being here. I'm here to talk about Norway. I think actually we do talk about you guys a little bit in Norway too, because you do some good stuff here. I heard you decided to have the possibility of paying with a Visa card or on the chargers, which is I think is really good. Yeah. And you make some nice cars. Jaguar I-Pace. You know how many Jaguars were sold in Norway 2017? 299. Do you know how many have been sold since the I-Pace was launched? 3,000. So there's no wonder that why this guy is quite happy. You know, this is Professor Dr. Ralf Spett, the CEO of Jaguar Land Rover. He came and spoke at our conference, the Nordic Electric Vehicle Summit, earlier this year. So he's pretty happy about the I-Pace, the sale of the I-Pace in Norway. So a little bit about the Norwegian Electric Vehicle Association, which I head. We're a non-profit NGO, an organization organizing owners of electric cars or drivers of electric cars. We're actually close to 80,000 members now. That's how we're funded. 35 employees. So we're a consumer organization working to help our members. But of course, our mission is to electrify transport as fast as possible. And to do that, I truly believe also in collaborating with industry, with car manufacturers, importers in Norway, and the charging industry as well. So why Norway? It's a pretty good question. Have you been to Norway? Any of you? A few? I always wonder why Norwegians, we go to London and UK all the time. You never go the other way. I mean, it's a very short distance. It's pretty cheap flights, you know? Come and visit Oslo. It's a pretty nice city. Anyway, why Norway? It's in Norway, we really, I think you probably still talk about electric mobility as something of the future a little bit, but we're living in it right now. And I will argue that that is a political choice, and I'll come back to that. You all know the EU new car fleet average target, right? Maximum 95 grams of CO2 per kilometer by 2021. Any of you want to guess where we're at in Norway so far this year? What's this number in Norway this year? It's 59. And the reason is, of course, the electric cars. This is a month ago, we have actually started seeing gas pumps being replaced with fast chargers. You say rapid chargers in London. Can I say fast chargers? You understand what I'm talking about. 50 kilowatts and above. I think I'm going to forget saying rapid chargers. Anyway, so this is a petrol station, Circle K, in Oslo. And they decided to just remove some pumps to make room for more fast chargers. And they're starting to do that with more stations as well, especially around Oslo where there's a lack of space. And they're quite happy about it too. So that's good. So what are the numbers? When you look at passenger cars and the sale of passenger cars, so far this year we're at 43.9%. So that means 43.9% of new car buyers this year have chosen a fully electric car. So when I say EV, I do not include plug-in hybrids. When we look at light commercial vehicles, it's 5.1, so not as good, but it's starting to pick up now because the government just introduced a new subsidy scheme for light commercial vehicles. And in total, we have 252,000 full electric passenger cars on Norwegian roads today. So that makes up about 9% of the car fleet in Norway. Of course, it's slow in the beginning. It takes time to change the whole fleet, but we're already starting to see an effect. And of course, this fleet share is higher in the cities. In our second biggest city, Bergen, on the west coast, they're actually now at 20, the fleet share in this city is 20% full electric cars. And fuel sales are down 3% this year. So we're starting to see a small effect of this number of cars. In total, we have about 2.7 million passenger cars in Norway. These are the most sold fully electric cars in Norway. The Tesla Model 3, obviously, selling really well. Last year it was the Nissan Leaf with a 40 kilowatt-hour battery pack. And with more and more different models to choose from, more and more people are also finding this an interesting buy. Our goals when it comes to reducing emissions in transport are these. From 2025, the goal is that we should only sell electric cars, fully electric cars, both when it comes to passenger cars and light commercial vehicles. So we have, I think for passenger cars, definitely possible. This can be done. We're on the way. And also, we are to reduce emissions with 50% by 2030. If we have a steady increase in the sales up towards 2025, we will have around 1.2 million electric vehicles on the road in Norway. Does that matter when it comes to CO2 emissions, do you think? If we look at the CO2 emissions from road transport in Norway, passenger cars adds 4.68 million tons CO2 equivalents, which is a lot. It's probably more here in the UK. With 1.2 million, or with actually a bit more than a million passenger cars, it actually takes down the CO2 emissions with 45%. And this is the reason why we're focusing on getting the market shares on the new vehicle sales up as fast as possible. Because the faster you go up there, the faster you get a bigger fleet and the reduction comes. So right now, the reduction of CO2 emissions aren't that big, but they will be. With light commercial vehicles, it's not that much. Here it's more the heavier transport, but of course there's more happening there as well. These number is only the light commercial vehicles. But there's a lot happening also with heavier transport now, and buses, etc. Okay, so why do we have this EV success and these high sales in Norway? Do you think it's because we built a lot of chargers a few years ago? No, because it's always in these kinds of conferences we're talking about the chicken and egg problem. And it's the chicken. It's the cars it starts with the cars. In Norway, the charging infrastructure has always been sort of lagging behind. This is starting to change now, though. And the reason why the sales have really grown is really this. Because in Norway, well, this is the situation, right, in any country. An EV is more expensive to produce, to manufacture. And it's still a lot more expensive, unfortunately. And that's why buying an electric car here in the UK is a lot more expensive than buying a petrol diesel engine car. In Norway, however, we have 25% VAT and a purchase tax as well. So buying a new car in Norway is expensive. And the purchase tax vary according to emissions and the weight of the cars, but EVs are exempt, both from the VAT and the purchase tax. So this is just an example, but that means an electric car is more or less the same price as the equivalent petrol diesel version. This is really the key to what is happening in Norway. This is the reason. And I'm trying to get this message through to more and more politicians because they still ask us, how do you do it? Well, this is how simple it is. And of course, it's simple, but it's still difficult because in Norway, we have a long history of taxing cars. And I know that politically it's pretty difficult to suddenly start doing that. But there are things you can do. I would argue it's a political choice because there's no need to copy exactly what Norway is doing. But think about doing a bonus-malus system at least. This is something that France started. Now Sweden introduced this last year. Sweden never had taxes on cars. 1st of July last year, they introduced a bonus-malus system. Do you know what that is? So it means taxing the most polluting cars. You don't even need to tax the average normal cars, but the most polluting ones. If you really want to buy one of those cars, pay extra tax. Use that tax to benefit the zero and low emission vehicles. And that will not affect your budget, the state budget. And then you could start at one level and slowly maybe increase it. That's the way to do it for more countries, I think, to speed up the introduction of electric cars. So it's all about taxing what you don't want and promote what you want. It's that easy. But we also have other incentives in Norway, which also helps. And it's a whole package that is making people think, well, maybe an EV is something for me. So as I already told you, we have a special support scheme for light commercial vehicles. And for zero-emission vehicles, meaning this also includes hydrogen cars, not plug-in vehicles. There's no annual road tax. There's less company car tax, only 60% instead of 100%, and access to bus lanes. And when it comes to the payment of public parking, ferries, we have a lot of ferries, especially on the west coast of Norway, and tolls coming into cities or also on the main highways. Fully electric cars pay maximum 50% of what a petrol diesel engine car pays. So those incentives are very visible for consumers. And Norway have lots of tolls. Driving into Oslo is very expensive. So this is a very important incentive. Are EVs only for cities? No. Of course, it started in the biggest cities, and you see the market shares are also higher in, for example, Oslo, 60% so far this year. But now the sales are really picking up everywhere. And Norway is a long country with mountains and sparsely populated. Even in, I don't know if you know, but where you see the Nordland county, that's where the polar circle cuts through. So it's pretty cold further up. And even Finnmark County has an 11% market share. There's only 80,000 people living there, and it's the size of Denmark. So that's pretty amazing. So if they can do it in Finnmark, you can definitely do it in the UK as well. And this guy lives in Finnmark. This is from a newspaper article a couple of years back. And I think he exemplifies a little bit what you see with EV drivers. He's obviously old. The articles say that he just bought this BMW i3. He lives far, far north in Karasjok. It's freezing cold. And the headlines say, what do you think happens to an EV in minus 40 degrees Celsius? Minus 40 degrees Celsius. So he took the journalist driving. It worked, it started perfectly, and as he said, well, the range would come down a lot, obviously. But he said, I'm just going to the supermarket anyway, it doesn't matter. But what I like about this picture is how he's standing there a little bit proud and happy about his car. And this is I think, probably one of the most important things with electrification, because when you talk about CO2 emissions, often there's something that you have to stop doing, something that you don't like. But electric mobility creates enthusiasm. And I think that is very important. If we are to succeed in reducing CO2 emissions, it's also doing things that people like. And driving an electric car is something people like. And we see that also from our numbers. We do surveys among EV owners every year. This last one was, we had 16,000 respondents. And 94% say that they are satisfied or very satisfied. And I think those are very good numbers when you think about still a lack of charging stations and so on. Okay, so, and then what about charging? We have the policies in place. There's a lot of new electric cars coming. I think the next 1 to 2 years are probably going to be introduced another 20, 30 different models in Norway. Now the Chinese cars are coming as well. There's a lot of news about that. So there's a lot going on. Cars are coming, the policies are there. The consumers, they change quickly. By the way, Norwegians are not different from people here. We're not more environmentally friendly. It's the economic incentives that are driving this shift. And it's quite funny to see how people just a few years ago that were very skeptic now have changed. Like my dad, for example. He's 66 and he was usually said, no, this is not going to work. Now they drive an EV as well. It changes really quickly. But charging is the challenge because we're going to have so many more EVs in the years to come, and we already have some challenges. So one thing that is happening, this is also from our EV owners survey, is that we are seeing more people using fast chargers with cars with longer range, actually. It's not the opposite way. And the reason is that now people are buying an EV as their number one car. And it means that they also drive it a lot on longer trips. In Norway, typically to go to the mountains on the weekend, for example, to their cabin. So this goes up. Another challenge is that it's still a little bit to do when it comes to the technology, hardware and software. When we ask the EV owners, have you experienced fast chargers being out of order? 87% says yes. And if that only happened once, it's maybe okay, but when we ask them how often, 56% say it's happened occasionally or often. That's not good enough. And of course now, we're still in a bit of a sort of early adopter market, but now in Norway, really moving into to sort of the mass market. And people will not, this is not good enough for people who just want a car to work. And then we have queues. Is this working? Do you hear me? Yeah. This is, of course, maybe not the best example. This is the day before Christmas. Not very nice to be that guy in the BMW i3 at the back here with 2 fast chargers at the front. And that's the challenge with getting the infrastructure of fast chargers up and running, is that often the need is often on peak times, right? Friday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. And we ask EV owners about this. 64% say that they experience queues occasionally or often. Tesla, of course, have more chargers available for their drivers. The queues are often at their other stations. And the need going forward, we have about 250,000 cars today and about 2,200. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. 2,200 fast chargers. In 2025, with another 1 million cars, we're going to need 9,600 with the same amount of charges per car as today. It's difficult to know exactly if that is the correct answer, but maybe if this is a little bit too much, it's going to be sufficient in another 6 months. So it doesn't really matter. So there's a big market possibility here. Yeah, this was also what I talked about before. With longer range cars, people fast charge more. So long range is the light blue. But all in all, a lot of people do not fast charge and only do it once in a while. And that is the challenge in a market like here, or where it's still haven't really kicked off yet. The business model is not there in the beginning. But it's there very fast. And in Norway right now, it's really there. So we have different operators, more entering the market, and it's real competition. So the charging, in one way, I would say that maybe focus a little bit more on the incentives when it comes to the purchase of cars, because the charging infrastructure will sort of follow and happen because there's a market there. I have had probably meetings with 3-4 different companies the last 6 months that are planning to enter Norway now, in addition to these ones. And it's interesting also how, on the one hand, you have power companies, utilities, and then you have car manufacturers with Ionity, Tesla, and then now the petrol station chains are coming also. For example, Circle K in Norway, which are building a lot of chargers at the moment. So there is definitely a business case. I also wanted to tell you about the Nordic Electric Vehicle Summit that we organized in Oslo. As I said, it's not a very long trip. Every year, this is where Professor Dr. Ralf Spett was speaking. I was told I had to say Professor Dr. Ralf Spett, so I'm trained. So in April next year, you're very, very welcome. Thank you.